asking the question every founder, fund, and policymaker should be asking. How does European deep tech credibly 10x from here? Please welcome Thomas Buch, member of the executive board of Deutsche Börse, and Tobias Hens of McKinsey, joined on the stage by Max Schulte, Jan Götz, and Lucio Milanese. Please bear over with me. They'll walk us through the findings, and then Martin Schilling will join them to close out the conversation. Give them a big hand.
Thank you very much for so warmly welcoming us. Thank you for organizing this whole thing. Martin isn't here yet, right? So we'll say thanks to him later. I will be joined by a lot of people shortly, but what we wanted to make sure, as this was rightfully called a study, we wanted to put some facts into the room, but then we'll also promise that this is not yet another theoretical study that talks about all the shortcomings of the European deep tech ecosystem and the great potential that we're just not realizing, but it's one that calls for action. And that suggests very, very concrete actions. I think the one thing that I don't need to convince this audience of is that deep tech matters. And maybe to start with some of the numbers that why deep tech matters, though, is, well, there's clearly a climate crisis still going on. Yes, everyone talks about defense now, and there's an immediate crisis, but there's still a climate crisis to be solved, where deep tech can contribute quite significantly. There's an energy security question that came quite prominent in the light of recent geopolitical conflicts and is not resolved. There's clearly freedom and security that is on the line for Europe, and I assume that since you all live in Europe, despite all the shortcomings that we have in this great continent, you like the way that we live, and that needs protection. And last but not least, I mean, digital technology, what a buzzword, but only 10% or 2 out of the 20 world's largest technology companies are European, and only one is rather young, SAP from Germany. Then you have ASML, which is a great company, but not necessarily the youngest in the pack. And in all honesty, deep tech in Europe is gaining tremendous momentum. What you see here is the share of deep tech funding, global deep tech funding that goes into Europe, and while it was below 10% in 2015, so a decade ago, it got stabilized by more than 2x that now. Yes, we had years where it was 30%. Maybe that wasn't quite as sustainable as we hoped for it, but it looks like we're at a stable 2x of what it was a decade ago, with potential to build more. However, if you then do look a step closer and also compare both regular tech to deep tech, as well as deep dive into the later stage financing where the value creation of the companies often happens. In regular tech, the Americans spend sort of 0.5% of their GDP onto regular tech, so non-deep tech. We're at roughly half of that as Europeans. Well, that's a problem itself, but then if you go into deep tech, the Americans spend more, we spend less, which is counterintuitive given all the prerequisites that we do have in place here. And that does lead to a lot of value then actually leaving Europe. If you look at companies that go public or exit privately, European companies that go public or exit privately, then already at the moment of exit, we counted 700 billion euros value lost. And then if you add on the development of these companies post-exit, the number becomes even larger. So already from an economic perspective, not even talking about sovereignty or any of that, that's a huge problem. And the thing is, we do have the requirements and the baselines and the prerequisites in place. If you look at patent applications, university spin-outs, there is European countries that are ahead of the US, not just on par, ahead of the US. But then we somehow don't make it through the funnel. And while, again, there's loads of momentum, we just had a number of policymakers on stage that talked about the initiatives that are going on. And well, yes, the Scale Up Europe Fund that was announced 2 days ago is the latest of I do personally believe great momentum that we also do have on the policy side. It's clearly not enough, and it's clearly not yet in action. And I mean, I said in the beginning, that defense is kind of overshadowing everything at the moment. Yes, it is. I think defense is a good sector to look into. If you take the spend of NATO Europe in defense today, that's roughly 100 billion a year. If you look at what's in the plans of the countries, that's a 3x until 2029, or in 2029. Put differently, you have an additional 200 billion or so that someone needs to put up, needs to create value for. And, you know, with typical multiples, that's about sort of somewhere in the 400 to 800 billion range of enterprise value that's behind that. And then, you know, that's 10x Volkswagen, which, you know, I personally don't think we'll build another 10 Volkswagens in the next couple of years. That's 35x of the current valuation of the most valuable defense tech companies. So there's such a huge potential, both for traditional corporates to step in, as well as for startups and scale-ups to really now 10x, as the study presentation says. And we have done that together before. We have done that between corporates and startups and the ecosystem and the policymakers and everyone before. In COVID, we managed quite quickly to get everyone vaccinated in a collaboration of policymakers that put money in and that eased regulation, and the combination of a startup, if you so want to call them, BioNTech, that had the technology, a corporate, Pfizer, that then industrialized it and mass produced it, and we were all able to go and see our friends again or go to wonderful conferences. So it is possible also in Europe, and we do want to discuss now how. And with that, Thomas, I would like to ask you on stage first. I'll make some space here.
Yeah, hey, Tobias.
It's very good to have you, as always.
Great to be here.
And we do want to talk a little bit about why you, as Deutsche Börse, contributed so significantly to not only the study, but the ecosystem as a whole, and have done so for years and years and years. Can you tell me a little bit about how you think that deep tech is relevant, or why you think it is relevant, or if you think it is relevant at all?
Yeah, I think you made the point, Toby, in the study quite nicely. It is absolutely crucial that we are able not only to found great companies and startups, which we have in Europe, but that we are also able to scale them up to build really global champions. Right? And if we look in Europe, the last company that was founded, that went public in Europe, that went beyond the 100 billion was SAP in 1972. That is a problem. That is a big issue for Europe. So we, as Deutsche Börse, of course, we really would like to promote IPO as an exit channel and as the opportunity for companies to scale up. And that really requires an ecosystem. And it also requires an ecosystem in the late stage funding that we've seen earlier. So that allows in the later funding rounds companies to grow with capital, with investors here in Europe.
You said you do want to promote IPO as a main exit channel. How do you do that, and what's the shortcoming you see today?
I think there are various layers to it. And I think there's also, if we look at now the public debate, if we look at the attention that we get from the political sector, there's really a lot of reason for optimism, in particular in Germany. If we look at our IPO sort of pipeline, it is encouraging. If we look at the past 10 years, the 4 largest IPOs took place in Germany. I think there's 3 critical factors that really we need to work on the IPO side to get more attractive. One is, first of all, to have competitive frameworks here for IPOs to go public, and that is now much better. There have been some initiatives also launched in Europe, both on the German level with the Zukunftsfinanzierungsgesetz, also with the EU Listing Act. I think secondly, what we really need is to activate, it's always the 33 trillion European savings. We need to activate capital in Europe. That's part of the Savings and Investment Union, to be invested on the equity side, to be invested in companies. And of course, one of the key levers for that is, and that is why we are very focused on it, is pension reform, pension reform in Germany and in Europe. And there are the examples like Sweden where we see it really helps and it creates an ecosystem. And I think the third point that is very crucial is that we overcome fragmentation in Europe of the capital markets. We have very little liquidity because there's a lot of dark trading, a lot of fragmentation. There's more than 300 venues. So we really need also in the regulatory discussion a strengthening of lit, transparent trading again. I think these are the key levers, really.
Modest and action-oriented as you are, you talked about what needs to be done. But I mean, you're on stage, there's founders here. You should have the opportunity to also pitch a little bit. Why should anyone go public in, well, Europe or Frankfurt, your choice, versus anywhere else in the world?
I think very clearly, if you look at Deutsche Börse, it provides not only sort of the access to global liquidity, and if you look at the studies, which we are happy to share for the European companies that went public, we see they have a superior aftermarket performance staying in Europe than going into the US. You can very clearly see that. And I think we have also encouraging signals now on the global base that investors are looking towards Europe. We had more than 45% ETF inflows in Europe, more than in the US. If we look at the defense sector, now on deep tech, we had 5 IPOs in the past 24 months, so TKMS and RANK, for instance, with an average aftermarket performance of 130%, right? So it is attractive and there is investor attention also here, in particular on Deutsche Börse.
Yeah, clearly. And the question then becomes a little bit, you also need companies that are ready to IPO. How do you see the ecosystem there in Europe at the moment, and what are the things where you'd wish for companies to do or for others to do with these companies or help these companies doing so that they are ready to IPO and exit?
And there I can only offer, if any, there are founders here and many companies here. We as Deutsche Börse, we want to help early on to be ready to go public, which requires sort of the sophistication on investor relation, on capital markets communication, on reporting, on many things. That is something that we really focus on early on. And we also want to provide the stage. I think we have seen, and to my surprise, I was always very much electronic trading. Now Deutsche Börse is the last exchange to keep a floor sort of in Frankfurt, but it is actually a great stage for companies to showcase their company, to make it public, and we see that in all the IPO ceremonies that we do. So I think there are a lot of levers, but I can only say as an advice, start very early in the planning to be public markets ready, and we are there to help.
Perfect. And then maybe last question before we get the actual makers and founders to the stage. You have been doing this for a long time. I think you joined Deutsche Börse in 1995, if I'm not mistaken. So that's quite some experience on stage that we do want to leverage. Are you more or less optimistic today about the European tech scene and the value creation that comes from it than 30 years ago?
And I have to say, just to mention that we just celebrated our 25th anniversary of being a publicly listed company.
There you go.
Which gives you a little bit the feeling of how it is to do the quarterly financial communication. And I have to say, Toby, I'm much more optimistic than I would have been 5 years ago. And I think the reason for being that optimistic is that the sense of urgency has really grown tremendously, and you see it on various fronts. You see it if you look at the discussions around reforming the pension. You see it when you hear, sort of listen to the policy stakeholders on creating European sovereignty in the fields of technology, energy, defense, and also capital markets. So I think the need for action is really understood, and things, I mean, Europe is always complicated with 27 countries, but things are starting to come. So for instance, now we get the 28th regime, hopefully, being rolled out. So there are a lot of examples where I think things start to be moving. And of course, we see more attention to European capital markets also with what's going on in the US. Yeah.
the sense of urgency. I love that. So let's talk about the actions that are urgently needed. With that, Max, Jan, Lucio, please join us up here.
Hey.
I think we have 2 microphones for 3 people. We'll manage, right?
That's fine, absolutely.
Perfect. Very good. So what we thought we needed to do is not just do another theoretical study, but we'd actually thought, A, we should talk to the people that know what's needed, and B, we should really get to some bigger bets than that next bit of an incremental one. And then Max, Jan, Lucio, even though you probably need no introduction to anyone in this room, before we go into the big bets that you think and you fellow founders in the sector think that are relevant to your specific industry or sector, please take a moment to tell us what you do and why you're here. Max.
Okay, so I usually try to avoid this. That's the reason I wear the same shirt every time. You can see this as proof on the wall, right? So you can also, there's an olfactoric proof, but don't come that close, right? So I'm Max, I'm 42, I'm a physicist, married, 4 kids, living a bit south of Munich at the moment. And what I do, after having done physics for a long time, I'm not doing physics anymore, which is good for physics, but also good for me. I'm now running Constellar, and Constellar is a satellite operator. So we design, build, launch, and operate satellites. And what we do is slightly different than other satellite operators is that we are, yes, in the area of taking pretty pictures, but we're actually taking pretty temperatured pictures, which gives an idea of what activities are happening. So let's say normal satellites tell you that's a boat. Other satellites tell you that's how big the boat is, and we can tell you if the engine is off, where the boat is heading, and how fast it's doing that. Right? So activity monitoring from space, 2 satellites up, and now going into scaling mode. Very happy to be here. Thanks, Tobias.
Jan.
All right, I'm the second physicist then in the row.
We're really sorry this was not planned.
Jesus.
But yeah, I was working in the field of quantum physics, quantum computing. And at some point, it became clear that if you want to scale the technology, it's not going to happen in the university labs. I think one thing we are good at in Europe is the university landscape and the research. So we were not behind at that point in time. This was maybe 2017, 2018. But it was clear if we want to stay competitive, we need to build a company to do this, because in the US, this is how it was done. And we decided to spin out a company from Aalto University. This is where I was researching back in the day. We've been building the company now to, I think, Europe's largest effort. We are the company that has sold most quantum computers around the world. It's 23 now, many in Europe, but also in Asia and the US. And yeah, we are planning to go public, so we hope to be also a good example from this perspective.
Very good. Lucio.
And here we go with the third physicist. Where we have a row today. I'm Lucio Milanese. I'm one of the co-founders at Proxima Fusion. We work on designing, building, and then eventually operating fusion power plants for energy and electricity production. We're building on the strong scientific and technological tradition of Germany and Europe, particularly on the field of magnetic confinement and more specifically on stellarators. We're a spin out of the Max Planck Institute for Plasma Physics, which is also one of our major academic partners. And we're working towards milestones to deliver first magnet prototypes, then net energy demonstrator, and then eventually first of a kind fusion power plant.
Thank you. And I was just scrolling through my notes. Thomas, are you a physicist?
No, I'm just...
Okay, so you need to save us then, because I'm one too. So you're the only one with business sense on stage.
Three physicists and a strategy consultant. That is really...
And that's how many jokes will start henceforth. Very good. But besides that, so big bets for defense and space. We'll go. Tell us what you think the sector needs and why.
Okay, so when we look at defense and space, I know we're approaching this a lot from the industrial perspective, and that is good, that's important. But defense is a bit of a special thing, special beast, because in the end, what we need is to be strong, we need to be self-sufficient to a certain degree, and so on, and we need to enable our troops to do their job in the best possible way, right? And how do we do this, right? And you do it like in any other sector. You create an ecosystem from which they can get the best solutions. Now imagine 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 is you have a single organization which will deliver all the innovation, which delivers all the, let's say, benefits, all the solutions. Scenario 2 is you have an ecosystem where there's a lot of competition and there might be a little of resource scarcity. So people really need to think, hey, how can I make this possible? What do you think is the better ecosystem to deliver what is needed in defense? Well, on the one hand side, if you have a single monostructure, and this monostructure is unable to fail. It must not fail because the whole system relies on that monostructure. So it will be slow, it will be risk averse, and it will be expensive. Because also, why shouldn't you be expensive? A, it takes long, and B, well, there is no alternative, right? If you look at an ecosystem, on the other hand, you can have competitive pricing, you can have competitive innovation, and I think that's what we need. So in the end, what we require for defense is first of all the ecosystem, and we need to build that. And right now, in particular in space, we have this opportunity because suddenly there's capital available. And this capital is ecosystem forming and shaping. To just give you a few numbers there, well, another physicist, more numbers, right? Sorry for that. Right now, the entire ecosystem, the space ecosystem Germany has a turnover of around about 2 billion. Now, the Ministry of Defense is pumping 8 to 10 billion into that ecosystem per year. It cannot really absorb that. That's the reason I'm saying it's ecosystem shaping, because the ecosystem 5 years from now will look very, very different today. So what is the goal? Build an ecosystem. There will be competition. That's good for pricing. That's good for innovation. That's good for speed. And if 3 out of 10 companies fail, the system still hasn't failed. Number one, right? Number two is do that fast, right? And the big bet is here, you need to take a leap of faith and enable those players, and I'm obviously slightly biased because we're part of those players, enable those players to take part of the ecosystem, getting contracts with the defense forces to make sure you're creating enough of primes which can then take, let's say, take the ecosystem to the next level. So the mission, yes, achieve 10x growth. I think that's actually probably an understatement. I guess it's going to be more, right? But the idea is best possible solution comes from innovation. Innovation is based on ecosystem which is resilient. And that's the important thing we need to take a bet on. And I'm betting that we are going to take that bet.
Okay, next part is high-performance computing. The bet is to build a global champion in next-generation compute for cost-effective and industrial applications made in Europe. And I think this combines a lot of things. This application layer, I think, is super important because this is where we are strong in Europe, but we have so much industry on the end-user side who wants to use it. They're desperate to use it. But the only way to get the compute from is to buy from the US players. And that's critical. And that's the why, right? Because A, basically we are dependent on the price, but also if they say we are not giving it to you anymore, I think we do have a very, let's say, serious challenge there as well. So there's really a need to do something also from the sovereignty aspect, that we are not reliant only on a single source here. The challenge here is really to do this in a competitive way because we don't have, let's say, the Microsofts and Googles and IBMs of the world. So we need to build it ourselves from Europe. This means we need, again, a whole ecosystem to do this. And this means commercialization, scaling, but also deployment. And the two ways to achieve this, number A, is to really kind of create the demand. And it was also mentioned, defense is only one way to do it. The public sector can be doing it. It can also be public-private partnerships and the like. And really creating these anchor customers to scale the companies. And I think we are a good example. The computers that we build and sell, they create revenue, which is nice for us. But with each euro or dollar that we get revenue, actually 5 to 10x, we can trigger investments again into it. So I think this is the big lever that we have here, having the anchor from the States and others. But the other thing then is also we need to keep on executing and we need to build the future as well. And the second part here is building and launching a European chip design center. And I love the ambition level here within the next 6 to 12 months. It would be wonderful, of course, if we can get this done. And I hope there are maybe still a few politicians in the room. So let's really, these are, I think, the timescales that we as founders are thinking about. So very happy to present this also on behalf of many others who have been contributing. And yeah, let's get our sleeves up and start executing.
Perfect. And then I'll skip the page again that no one can read, and we'll go right into the mission. Lucio.
Absolutely. So with fusion and energy in general, we need strong anchor customer, as was just said. We need concentration in large projects. Let's not spread things too thin. Be able for the government as well as the private sector to pick winners early. Something that I hear often is the government is bad at picking winners, the government should not do this, blah, blah, blah. And yet probably this year we're going to have an IPO of one company, SpaceX in the US, that's a $1 trillion company that was born and thrived on government contracts, earning those contracts by being better than others. When they got the contracts from NASA, there were 20 submissions, including from both legacy, like Lockheed Martin, Airbus, and startups. And SpaceX was the best and the cheapest. They won. They got contracts then numbering billions of dollars. And now they're one of the most valuable companies in the world. And I don't see why we cannot do this in Europe as well, at scale, at speed. It can be part of milestones-based programs. It can be part of guarantees that no taxpayers' money gets wasted. But there is no reason why we cannot work hard to build our champions as well. In the US, the House of Capitalisms, a lot of champions are built with public support. Another one is Palantir. I'm not sure what's the current valuation, but it's probably like 300-400 billion today. And they're also like mostly thriving in their growth on contracts from the Pentagon, but also the civil service. So concentration, speed, for sure accountability, desire and ability to pick winners and accelerate the ecosystems.
Thank you. So to further entertain Thomas' joke of three physicists, stock market expert and a management consulting being on stage, the management consulting is going to ask, this is great, but who does what by when? So can you tell me more, each of you, on the who does, well, the what you talked about, but who by when, please?
Maybe we can reverse the order for symmetry,
please.
Since we're physicists. So we are in good shape in Germany and Europe for fusion, in a sense that there is already the right degree of ambition in terms of total funding. Yesterday, the fusion roadmap of the government was announced, and the investment up until 2029 is 2.45 billion. Up until 2037 is 9 billion. We need a milestones-based program funded with at least 650 million already this year, with ideally the milestones confirmed and peer-reviewed already by December. We need a well-funded IPCEI on fusion that Germany has already joined, but it needs to be endowed with probably the order of 400 or 500 million up till 2029 that can be taken out of the 2.45 billion total investment. And again, competitive process selection in a few 1-2 large-scale demonstrators. And then, of course, we also have some homework to do. We need to raise the matching capital for these investments. And at Proxima, we're working on it. And then, of course, the technology development that will be at the core of everything, right? But on this part, I really think in Europe, at least for fusion, but I think for other technologies, that's certainly not the limiting factor. We have talent, we have science, we have the supply chain. So with the right amount of capital, we can compete in any of these industries.
Perfect. So Jan, who and by when?
Yeah, so I think in the advanced computing, I mentioned this already, we don't have the big players in Europe, so this means basically it's the startups and scale-ups that have to do it. But the good news is we are ready, and I mean the whole advanced computing, we have great other examples like Black Semiconductor and the like, who are building huge infrastructure as well. So I think the foundation is there, and what we're building, of course, again, is a whole compute ecosystem, including the interconnects, and also there, if you think about the optics, a lot of very good stuff happening here in Europe. So the goal is really to build interconnected advanced computing centers in and from Europe, and this is not by when it's ready, because because in semiconductors, that's not how it works. You have Moore's law going on for decades already. But the question is, it's a kind of a race, it's a marathon, and you want to stay kind of on top of the curve. And that's the important thing, is like how strong of a muscle do you have to keep leading this. And this is why we need the ecosystem, and also I think in computing, the government is ready. There are programs both on the European level, on the national level. There are very clear milestones, and there are procurement in place, and also the industry is getting ready. Maybe not yet at a level where it could be, but I think the understanding is there, and this is, I would agree, I'm also quite optimistic at the moment that we can get something done in the next 5 years for sure. We can build up an ecosystem in advanced computing that can compete globally at many levels.
Perfect. And Max had a lot of time to think about that. So what's your concise answer to the who by when?
Yes. Okay. So let's start with the space part, but it's, I think, a representative action for the entire defense area, just in space. It's very concrete. Within the next 18 months, take 20% of the 35 billion and invest them directly with anchor contracts into SMEs and startups, scale-ups. Obviously, they need to perform. Then it's our task to leverage that capital 5 to 10x, right? Which basically means we double the entire budget, right? More than double the entire budget. That's number one. Number two is start parallel procurement and do so starting this year, ideally. Let's say the next 12 months, let's be fair. The next 12 months, which means that instead of ordering 50x from a single company, order 5 times 10x or 10 times 5x from several companies. And then see who actually delivers more than PowerPoint, who actually delivers in time, in budget, in performance, and raise those. And if some of them die, then some of them die. That is okay, right? But be competitive. And the third one is, well, change your mindset. And that's not easy to do, right? Change your mindset, become more competitive. And that's not something I can give a time scale for, but ideally it happens this evening.
Yes, please. Thomas, does that give you now more or less comfort that you'll have more companies that are exit ready?
It gives me extreme comfort to see both the sophistication, the skill, but also the determination and passion. I think that is required. So I really have a lot of respect for all those that are founders that built this. And I think it again shows when we just listen to you how much expertise there is also in Europe, right? There's no reason really to be too humble there.
Yeah. I do totally agree. Yeah. Now, the beauty of an ecosystem is that you can learn from each other. You have now heard what the other, I'm just going to call them sectors now, need and want. Anything that you would have changed in what you put down beforehand? Jan, maybe starting with you, is the one in the middle this time?
I think as founders, we are quite alike. And usually in many of those slides, you can just change the word from quantum to space or to fusion or whatever it is. But the key challenges and the key solutions, I think, are more or less the same. The timelines are long, the challenges are hard, the people are very clever, but the instruments, they don't really change on how to scale things up. Yeah. That's my view.
And I just really hope you will have the experience, if you do your pitches like now, that you find investors here in Europe that understand it and that believe in it, right? Because it's not just US or foreign investors that are coming to you.
100%. The other two, do you agree with Jan's statement?
Yes, I agree. And I think that we should do more to work together to push the public and the private sector in the right direction. I think sometimes a bit siloed, so the fusion startups have their own association, and I guess quantum, you probably talk to each other, maybe you have some common work, but I think like at least sort of like the key pillars of the high-tech agenda and space should work together to basically promote the healthiest and fastest way to grow together.
Any additional thoughts?
Just 2 additional thoughts. The first one is, when I was living in the US about 17 years back, about 17.24 years back. Yeah,
that physicist thing is
really okay. Can't help
Just
it.
give us the days.
Yeah, the days, exactly. It was a Monday.
Binary code.
I saw something which I found rather bewildering. I was at university, UCSB, University of Santa Barbara, or University of California, Santa Barbara, and there was always military personnel on campus. and you had your own military campus inside the university campus. Like, this is a bit weird for European, okay? Now I see this was actually a strength because there's a very strong entanglement between the sectors. It's not siloed, right? The public sector, civil as well as non-civil, works very closely with academia and so on and so forth. So seeing this today, having people in uniform, having people without uniform, having even physicists on stage, gives me hope, right? Because we do need this entanglement. We all need to work together. And yes, we can just exchange the slides, and usually what I do, I take your slides and just put defense instead of quantum, right? And reads well. No, but the whole point is that we need this entanglement, and we need to talk to each other, and we need to open these silos. That is one thing I would wish for, and we haven't really said this, but I mean the whole conference said about this, the principle. Number one, and number two, I spent 10 years in academia, and I think it was good 10 years, right? Then I spent another 7 years in applied research, and it was another 7 good years. I have no entrepreneurial education whatsoever. So I'll do every single mistake there is. And I'm an experimental physicist, right? So I
Here we go with the differentiations.
Right? So I do every single mistake there is. But if I would get, at the university level, already education in, hey, don't be risk averse. Like, try things out. It's an experiment. You can't fail. You can just learn. Get a bit of entrepreneurial thinking at an early stage. I'm not sure how you see it. It would have helped me tremendously. And we probably have been as far as we are today 3 years ago. So this is also something we should be thinking as an ecosystem. And I would definitely have benefited from that.
Yeah.
Very clear and heartfelt statement, for sure. The question now becomes, how do we do that? I think it's 2 points that you mentioned, right? These closer interlink between the different verticals or sectors within deep tech, as well as that whole mindset session way before people become founders. How do we do that beyond deep tech momentum?
I guess it's my turn to start again. I think that what in Europe we have lacked over the last decade or so, in part, was the first wave of founders coming from Silicon Valley and others, whether it's the PayPal mafia or not, like actually going and becoming either serial entrepreneur or funding and supporting the next generation of founders. And I think probably right now we are seeing in Europe what the US had like 10 or 15 years ago, and we may have in this broader room like the first €1 trillion company that will IPO soon, hopefully, and then skyrocket.
Maybe in this round.
Maybe, yeah, and then and then I think it will be up to us to just like not go and retire and live in the Bahamas, but keep building, keep educating, keep supporting the next generation of founders, so that virtuous cycle that is working very well in the US can also work very well in Europe.
How do we then extend that to the universities and, well, maybe even secondary, primary schools where that whole mindset is learned?
Yeah, I think, and I was about to talk about this anyway, so I think that's a great question. So, I mean, I still give lectures at university, physics lectures, but also I like students and I like to see them grow. What I like a lot also is still engaging with students. So I do at Aalto or TU Munich or many other places, I sit down with their kind of the young entrepreneurs in a closed room and let them just ask questions. And I think we don't talk enough about mistakes. And maybe you don't want to talk too openly on a stage like this about all the mistakes you did. We do them anyways, I agree. But I think be very open, have this kind of failure culture and then embrace this. And then maybe you engage with the students, maybe you become an angel investor in some of them or a mentor or something like this. Of course, it takes time, right? And that's the challenge for a founder, because every day has only 24 hours. And then the question is, how do you allocate your time? But at least I personally do think, and I do see a lot of value in this kind of generational thinking and giving something at least back to the next generation.
Do you need to be as successful as you are today to start doing that? Leading question. Can founders that are not close to IPO already give back?
Of course, I was doing this already when I was, let's say, a young kid in entrepreneurial ages. So I think the main point is about really not only talking about the shiny stories, but it's about talking about all the mistakes that you don't want them to do, because that's so much kind of more efficient than just telling your latest success or funding round or whatever it was.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's the leading question, because there's loads of people in the room that can start doing that tomorrow.
So I try with 3 things again. First thing, if you're from government, put skin in the game, right? No one ever got fired for hiring IBM. Maybe you get fired for hiring us or you guys, right? Okay, but then you've probably done the right thing. Okay, so actually, I don't think you'll get fired, right? Put skin in the game, right? Do something which is a bit bold. We need boldness right now. Number one. Number two, if you're a founder, and that's easy, we all love competition, right? Be competitive. Don't shy away from competition. Be KPI-based. Say, hey, I'm going against the big guys or the other guys and whatever, and if I'm the best, cool, I win. And if not, so what? Then I do something else. Or I try another route, right? That's number two. And number three, if you are not in the first two groups, but actually it's true for everybody. If you are reading something in the media, and you're reading something like, hey, there's a rocket and it has exploded after launch after 30 seconds, don't go like, oh, fuck, we fucked it up again. Go like, wow, amazing, they did 30 seconds. That's amazing, and they're only 5 years old. That's really something to celebrate, right? So next time maybe we go a minute or 2 minutes, or I don't know. Because if you look at SpaceX, they only also did 30 seconds, right? So don't go into this mode of, ah, crap, it failed, going like, hey, let's celebrate the success which is there and try to reframe into what you've done versus what you've missed.
I'm not sure what to say after that. But I'll try anyway.
Try a physics joke.
Proven by induction. Good. On a more serious note, listening to all of you, and I think what I found amazing, maybe to also wrap it up now a little bit, is to say you all talked about the government quite a bit, but you did not talk about deregulation so much. You did not talk about the government just pouring money into your companies so much. You talked about the government finally becoming an actual customer of the startup scale-up tech ecosystem. I think that's sort of the one takeaway, the government as a smart customer. That's what's really needed. And the other takeaway is, of course, money. I mean, revenues from the government are the best type of financing, I guess. But at the same time, there's, of course, also still venture debt and all other types of financing needed. And there, Thomas, you talked in the beginning about the pension funds and the pension schemes that, you know, finance the successful ecosystems in Europe. You talked about Sweden. Sweden has, relative to GDP, more late-stage financing than the US. That's for a reason. And, you know, that wouldn't only benefit the more pension money into startups, wouldn't only benefit the startups, but also the pension system. So that's another no-brainer almost. So the government as customer and pension money is, I think, the two big things that I'm hearing. Thomas, please.
No, we need to, as I said, we have 30 trillion savings on savings accounts with little return. We need to make it available and invest it into these ideas, into our future, into research, and into scaling up, right? And that this framework we really need to create.
Very, very much so. Yeah. And with that, I mean, thank you so much for being here with us. But you know, you wouldn't all have been here if it wasn't for Martin and the DTM team. So please join us on stage. And Martin knows what's coming, because you know, you all talked about ecosystem orchestration. You all talked about these things now needing to actually come into action. We try to purposefully focus on only 3 big bets and don't, you know, write another 100 pages of 2,000 measures that now should be happening. But you know, it's those 3, please, with the missions behind it. Martin, how are we going to do that now, past tomorrow?
So first, Toby, thanks to let me add a bit of gender diversity to this stage. Yes, I would love to do 2 commitments. You ask what, by whom, by when. So the first commitment, we had a really, really good idea this morning by Frank Appel. And he said, literally, let's together work that every European enterprise, large enterprise, commits 1% of their procurement volume to startups. So it's government, yes, and there is the corporate side. Yeah? So my commitment is to all of you 3 and to everyone who's interested in the room, let's together set up this initiative, and let's, with people like Frank Appel and all the rest who's here, try to convince the literally the CEOs of the largest enterprises to do this 1% pledge. This alone would be 10 billion in Germany. Yeah, so this would be potential revenue for you. And this is one game changer. My second commitment is to you, actually. Thomas and I had a good discussion. To to inspire German pension and European pension funds to learn from the best Europeans. For example, the Swedish pension funds invest a lot to the startup ecosystem. Why don't we bring them together so we can learn each other from Europe, sharing European best practice?
Yeah, and we'll continue to push for that. You can be sure.
Perfect. And then I hope the third commitment, which you didn't explicitly give, but is to use the platform that DTM is. I always heard you pitching not a conference, but a platform, to now push these things forward in the month to come, and we'll be here to help, of course. And I hope many of you are also inspired. Please, approach Martin, Thomas, us, everyone, and pitch in. And with that, let's really get those big bets into reality. Thank you very much.